All right, Angela, welcome to the show. It's great to finally have you here after months of haggling.
Great to be here. Thank you so much. I
Uh,
appreciate the reach out.
awesome. I appreciate that too. And I start every episode kind of the same. So hopefully for people who listen, they're like, oh, not again. But the format I like to do is like have you introduce yourself. What you do, who you are, and how you got to where you are today. I find that's a really good jumping off point for our conversation.
Sure. Great. Happy to. Hope everybody else finds it interesting. So my name is Angela Genaro Ruilova, and I'm the VP of Talent Development for Compass Group North America. We are here in Charlotte, but have 28 sectors under the Compass umbrella. So 28 different businesses under the Compass umbrella. So it's a big remit. And a really, really exciting time to be at Compass, if I'm honest. A little bit about sort of who I am and how I got here. I actually came from Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, where I got my bachelor's in hotel restaurant management. So I've been a hospitality lover from day one. It's always been a passion of mine. I've always been excited about the hospitality industry. Have always been really energized by the people in hotels and restaurants, and just love the all-around vibe. So once I graduated, I was in hotels for a while with a hotel chain, Omni Hotels, for about 6 years. And then I was so cold in Boston, I had to take a one-way flight to LA. And so I left the hospitality industry, stuck with HR, and continued to just grow my HR skill set and experience in different industries. And when I had the opportunity to come back to hospitality and join Compass, it had to be like one of the most exciting times for me. So I've been in and around HR for about 25 years and now really focus on talent development and just love the hospitality industry in general. And it's a great time to be at Compass.
That's awesome. Okay, so you said that it was really exciting time at Compass. It's twice you said that in the introduction. So tell me why. What's getting you so excited today?
Well, in all honesty, we are hitting a huge growth spurt. We've got so much investment in our people and in talent in general. We just launched our Fuel Our Future talent strategy, which is going to take us from about 300,000 employees to around 450,000 employees in 5 years. And so we've got a lot ahead of us, and we've got a lot to focus on, and talent is at the heart of that. And so I'm really excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's interesting because I talk to a lot of people about thinking about like company culture, as they grow and grow so aggressively. I mean, when I say aggressive, I mean like quickly is what I'm kind of getting at. But like, I guess, as a talent leader and you think about like engendering talent and engendering sort of leadership in the company, how do you think about like the talent and sort of the cultural challenges that come up growing so quickly? Is that like kind of at the forefront of your remit or of your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we certainly think about, how do we maintain our culture when you grow so quickly and so broadly, right? We're focused on North America. Compass Group is a global company, but we're focused on North America. And the more we acquire or the more we hire or the more areas we get into and the different national accounts that we win, that culture piece is really pivotal to making it work, because we win accounts based on our culture. We win accounts based on the core of who we are. And so making sure that gets maintained every time we bring somebody on board and every time we move someone into a new role or give someone a new opportunity, we've got to keep that pretty solid.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think like at the scale, I mean, it's just enormous, the company. So the challenge in and of itself, I find is so fascinating because it's like, you know, I talk to people would say like 25 locations, or I speak to people with 100 locations, and they can still be very founder driven, you know, like the founder of the restaurant, the founder
Yep.
of the hotel, you know, or there's that kind of executive leadership that's been there from the get-go. Whereas when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people, like even know the number of employees at Compass Group, even in the United States?
300,000 in North
Like,
America.
it's like you're almost as big as the military, you know? And so when I think about that, you know what I mean? Like, what's the largest employer in the United States? You and Walmart. But
Yep.
like when I think about it, like, you know, how do you like think about, you know, talent progression within the company, or like identifying sort of up and coming talent and figure, because there's just so many. I mean, like how do you even design a process for identifying talent within the organization?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good question. And it's a huge part of the talent strategy that we just launched this year. So a lot of people will say when they join Compass, they've got kind of the same reaction. Wow, this is such a big organization. And they come with kind of an expectation around what that corporately feels like. But in some regards, it's really the biggest mom and pop you'll ever work for. Um, in a good way,
Yeah.
because it is so people driven and people focused. You still get the feeling that you're working for a real person. You're working for leaders that care about their people. And so the process that we have to manage talent, identify talent, assess talent is really one that looks at people's potential through navigating complexity, growth mindset, and going beyond. And so that lens, those overarching areas, if you will, are important to potential, because we're looking for people that maybe are depth, right? They've got more depth in their they're more subject matter experts, and they want to go deeper in their skill set. We've got folks that are all the way on the other end of the spectrum, and they have more breadth, and they want to take on bigger and kind of scarier challenges that they haven't done before. And then we've got people in the middle that are balanced. They sometimes want more breadth, or they might want more breadth in their career. But what we're telling people and what we believe is everyone has potential. Potential for what? How do we as leaders unlock that potential? And so we've got to get to know our talent really well against that lens of navigating complexity, growth mindset, and going beyond.
That's interesting because, you know, like say navigating complexity, growth mindset. If I even take one or two of those, if I think about like sort of navigating complexity, how do you even identify what that looks like in somebody? I know it's clearly like a core competency that you really want to go for, which is awesome because you've identified that. Like we want people who can navigate complexity, but it's like when you interview people or when you review people for like say promotionable kind of things, like what it's like, and it kind of feels like it kind of feels intangible. So like how do you go about thinking of measuring these sort of intangibles? Like growth mindset again, it's like hard to describe, but you know when you see it, you know. So how do you think about it in those kind of in that way?
Yeah, so I think some of the questions that we ask ourselves or even ask candidates, whether they're internal candidates or external candidates, we want to know, if you have a specific example, when have you really taken on a challenge that you've never done before? How do you feel about challenges that are new and different to you? How are you a change champion? Tell me about a time when you've brought somebody along, brought a team along, or were able to get others to think differently about how to solve a problem. When we think about navigating complexity, tell me about a large scale problem that you had to really break down and solve, and who did you partner with to solve that? What were the
Yeah.
dynamics? What were the different relationships that you had to build in order to get to the end? And what was the time frame? You've mentioned and it's obvious Compass is a large organization, and because of that, it is so dynamic, and the complexity here is sometimes underrated.
Yeah.
But it's a lot, and so it's really important that people understand not just how to collect dots, but how to connect the dots. You can't just run around collecting dots and learning, oh, this is how that works. Oh, this is how that works. This is how these people work together. You've got to then be able to level up and connect all of those dots up and outside of what's actually happening, so that you can think about how to solve problems differently, how to partner with people to solve to come up with solutions that are different.
Yeah, I love how articulate that is, by the way, because like I ask people these kind of similar questions all the time, and I find like it's very difficult to describe accurately or succinctly, or about the sort of intangible nature of reviewing people or identifying intangible assets within people, because I guess like in hospitality, I'm working in like service industry, like there's just so much that you need from people, and identifying the markers like growth mindset or navigating complexity. And then it's like, how do you look for specifics within those kind of barometers of these are the types of people at presumably like a score that we're like looking for, and then identifying those kind of questions. It sounds like it's the way you've spoken about it there is probably the most comprehensive I've heard anybody explain that to me in all my months of doing this podcast. And it's interesting in the sense, I mean, it's got to be that way though. Like you can't get to 300,000 employees, 300,000 employees without like having that very defined sort of, what's the word? Is bureaucracy the right word? But like a very defined process to like actually like measure and identify talent at that level of scale. I think it's like, and you made a great phrase in there that I'm definitely going to use, which is like a change champion. And I think that's a great phrase. I love taking away something out of every episode that's like somebody says something cool that I'm like, yeah, I need to start using that. Because like I think about that a lot in the sense of like how I think about hiring, in the sense that like I think we're like born into a complexity and into an entire change environment now. I think like every job is just so incredibly like dynamic that like you have to be willing. And there's a phrase I always like to use, which is like giving away your Legos, that the people I hire in their job spec like today might not be the same in 6 or 9 months, because if we double the size of our business, like what do you expect your role to be? Within that, it's like, do you want to keep doing the job spec, or do you want to be comfortable with the flexibility of the opportunity that may present itself, or the challenge that might bring itself as well? And so I always like, my old boss used it, she wrote, I'll send you the article, it's on First Round Capital, giving away your Legos. And it's like being comfortable with growth at scale and having like sort of that, like, how do you identify like flexibility in people to like be able to do jobs that they didn't necessarily sign up to do, but are on the mission. I think about that a lot because I'm in a 50 something plus company where we're growing, and obviously not 300,000, but I think it all kind of relates on some level. I think as well, I say, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I think you've made a really good point about growth. And I think something that we really look for too is, are you willing to learn something new in order to grow? So how agile are you in self-reflecting and just thinking through your own personal strengths? And as you see the business evolve, or as you see the business grow or change, how willing are you to do something different, to learn something that you haven't done before, try something that you haven't done before? How willing are you to take risks, because you know that that'll create some kind of meaningful change? I think that's a big part of growth mindset.
Totally. And it's amazing, like, it's a very interesting topic. And I think, kind of grooming leaders is just like, I mean, it's funny because I've been doing a lot of homework on it, because I speak to a lot of people that are responsible for managing sort of leaders and, designing culture. And all I get on my Instagram now is just videos about leadership, which is also kind of funny because I feel I'm drowning in leadership kind of.
There's a lot out there for sure.
There's so much. But one of the things that I've had people say, and I'm curious you're taking this, is that like leadership can actually be taught. You know, what is it? What when you hear me say that, what do you think? Leadership can be taught.
Leadership can be taught. Um, if you're coachable is what I would
Oh,
add to that statement, right? I think leadership can be taught. I think there's a lot of leadership competencies that you can get better at as long as you do enough self-reflection, as long as you're open to feedback, and as long as you're willing to flex your style and try things differently. Yeah, leadership can be taught. I mean, I think there are some innate pieces of leadership that just come more naturally to folks. But if you take your job as a leader seriously, I think you can learn a lot because, as you just mentioned, there's so much out there offered around how to do it well. You just have to be willing and able to absorb some of it.
and I guess that goes back to hiring the right person and then identifying that person within the company. So hopefully your process for identifying people internally for sort of leadership fast
Yeah.
tracks, so to speak.
I think one of the other things around navigating complexity specifically is, and that it's a big thing we look for when we're hiring, whether it's internally or externally, how effective is someone in showing empathy and
Yeah.
flexibility in order to achieve work through others? Because, you know, the higher up you get, the bigger remit you have, the larger team, you know, what have you, you've got to learn how to get work done through others. You can't be the doer. You can't be getting all the things done. You can't be micromanaging. When you talk about the scale of our organization, navigating complexity means you really understand how to get work done through others. And
Yeah.
you've got to have the right amount of empathy around how your team is operating, and then you've got to have a good amount of flexibility around how the work gets done, because it can't all get done maybe the way you exactly would do it. You've got to allow other people to grow into their strengths, realize their strengths, and then use their strengths.
You know, that's awesome. That's like so interesting to hear because I think like it's not necessarily saying the more you progress in your career, the more you should delegate. It's more like, and it's more like having a self awareness and having an empathy that you have to give away your Legos, so to speak. And you're trusting somebody, like you're actually putting trust in somebody, which is empathy, I guess. If you trust somebody that is you're empathetic to them to do the work at a level that you want them to do it. And I mean, I guess like, you know, it's interesting. Like I think like, you know, I think of this as well. The founder of Airbnb did a very good interview, and he talks a lot about, you know, the company grew so quickly, but he was completely out of control in the sense of not recognizing all the projects. He was like, I'm too much of a micromanager. So reined in the projects to be only things that he could focus on, almost like Steve Jobsian kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it talks about like how that like the lasering the focus and having a kind of a hierarchy to be able to manage it, because it was quite flat there, I believe, and everybody was just working on everything. And I was like, I guess like how you supposed to track everything. So it's interesting. I think about like, you know, like I think in hospitality in particular though, like the great leaders in hospitality, at least from the people that I've spoken to within this podcast, of which there has been many, is like, to your point, the traits are all kind of the same. You know, it's passion, it's empathy, it's ambition. It is like a sort of roll up your sleeves type determination. And I guess they're like applicable to like everything in life. Like I feel like just because you're in hospitality, that's these are like in particular like special, but I feel like they resonate even more in hospitality because ultimately you're in a people business first. You know, like I guess I'm divorced from reality because I'm in a screen for my whole job. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like something kind of slightly like disarming about that or something.
Yeah, I mean, hospitality is unique in that way. It is a people first business, right? We always say we're in the people business, not in the food business. We are in fact a food service organization, right? We're a contract food
Yeah.
organization, but we don't lead with that. We lead with we are a people business serving, serving food. So the hospitality part of that delivery is really critical. And if we can't keep that really personal engagement, that connection with our customer, um, you know, hospitality is in a really interesting place because there's so much technology being introduced into the environment. So the way that people place their orders a lot of times is through an app, and a lot of ways they pick up their orders is through like this organized little cubicle system where you sort of, you pick up your stuff. And, even when you go into a store where you might have, the opportunity to go and pick off the shelf or whatever, even when you check out, there's nobody there. And so there's a lot of ways that technology is kind of usurping the hospitality part of the connection, right? And it's really front of mind for us. Like we've got to make sure that we stay focused on connecting with the people.
Yeah, I mean, you hear this like constantly online of certain brands that I mean, if you name them, I don't understand. But there are certain brands that they have kiosks, and then people don't know how to use the kiosk, and the kids who work behind the cashier don't come out to help and show you how to use that kiosk. Yeah. You're like, what am I staring at here? This is a $10 burger. Although apparently it's gone viral for an $18.99 Happy Meal up in Connecticut now or something. So I've added the brand. But the point I'm making is that there definitely is this sort of dual reality that's happening with a lot of front of house restaurants, which is like, third party and offline have kind of consumed a huge amount of that business in a post-COVID sort of environment. And I feel now there's a retroing, like a pendulum swinging, where lots of brands I've spoken to are talking about like, how do we redefine what is the purpose of the in-store experience in a lot of these restaurants? So for example, I had the CEO of East Coast Subs on, and he was like, okay, like if we have like less space now internally because we got third party and pickup and everything else that exists. But for those that do come into the restaurant, A, what is the experience that like in terms of like the environment? And then B, what's the experience of like the actual food? So their big focus for the year was when you open that sandwich, that the wafting fumes come out of it, that you are getting such a superior version of that sandwich than what you would get on third party, which I find is fascinating because like he's not the only person that has described that sort of momentum for their businesses, which is like, we got to solve in store now in a new way for new people to experience it. Like, because I mean, I could go on about third party. I mean, I have not really met many. I've met many lamenters of third party. I guess I don't have many people in the restaurant industry that are like, this is the best thing that ever happened to us. It's kind of one of those funny ones. But I go on.
I was just gonna say that one of the funniest cartoons I saw right around the holidays said, "Hey, I'm waiting for my invite to the employee holiday party for the self-serve cashiers. Has anybody received their invitation?" So, you're at risk of putting your guests in the worker seat, right? Like in the employee seat. And that's not why they're there. That's not what they want to do. At least for particular brands, right? To your point, some brands, they're going to win with that. They're going to lead with that, and they've got a market for that. But I think, in large part for those brands that are wanting to wave the hospitality flag and be known for hospitality, I think there's just a real crucial point in terms of making sure you make a connection.
I totally agree with you. And what's interesting? Who did I have last week? And it's down your neck of the woods. Have you ever been to the Shuck and Shack?
Shuck and Shack? No. Is that? I'm assuming it's an oyster bar.
Yeah, it actually is. I actually think I might have butchered the name. JW.
I think oysters, when you're this far from the ocean, seems odd.
But I'm sure it's great. Charlotte. It's Charlotte far from the ocean. Anyway, they're all like down in Myrtle Beach. I know it's South Carolina, but they're on like all the like beach towns and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right.
But it's funny you talk about like sort of the in-store. And I'd honestly, he was so fascinating on talking about their in-store experience and how they basically don't do third party at all. Like they've like rejected it, and they never did it during COVID.
That's great.
Like they're like, you come here for the beers, you come here for the food, you come here for the entertainment. That's what we're selling you, not just like a burger, like oysters. You know what I mean? Like you just got, and it's interesting to think about the reaction. I think about that in the sense of the reaction to third party. That's kind of happened over the last, like, say,
Yeah.
I would say the last year. I feel like it was such a necessity for businesses, obviously post COVID and getting out of COVID. But
Yeah.
I think now there's, honestly, it's kind of cool to watch because I think there's like a ripe for disruption kind of play here. I don't know if it's like the Toasts or the Olos or the Ubers are going to solve what restaurants actually want here, which is like a fair freedom to use software to deliver food to people. You know, like it's a very interesting time, and I mean, obviously with AI, and I mean, yeah, I mean, it's
We have to, as humans, I mean, as humans, we have to be more human. If we can't stay connected to our humanness, and we can't share that humanness, and we can't perpetuate that humanness, and we can't create a human connection where people walk out of our, establishment feeling more human, then you might as well have a third party.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you think about like, the last comment I'm making this because I appreciate we're coming up on time is like ghost kitchens in particular. I see a lot online about people tracking down ghost kitchens. You know, like, oh, this says it's 114, International Drive when you get there, and it's an actual chain restaurant that this ghost kitchen is using the kitchen from. And it's like they just sell like chicken sandwiches. And so the question is, like, what's the point of the brand if it's divorced from reality on an online app? You know what I mean? How do you like, and I think that's going to be a huge challenge for restaurants and brands in like on these platforms is like standing out, because if they're effectively gatekeepers, you're kind of a slave to the platform in and of itself. And so if people are just looking up like chicken fingers as opposed to whatever chicken restaurant, you know what I mean? It's like, what does that mean for your brand if you're not top of mind, but they want chicken fingers and it's gatekeeped by this? I think about that a lot because I think that's a huge challenge for a lot of restaurants, actually, especially smaller ones.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a unique situation because most, again, in contract food services, we are in an establishment, right? We are in the corporate building, we are in the university, we're on the campus, we're in the hospital, we're in the senior living environment, and so we have control for the most part of all the options that are provided in that environment in a lot of cases, and so we have an opportunity to stay really close to the quality and be sure that that's a big part of the brand, the delivery and just sort of the quality that shows up. So
totally. And I think that's it. I think that's the mantra for 2024 is like, leaning back into food quality. I think, especially after like the crazy commodity price experience that everybody had over like the last 18 months, we're kind of getting out the back end now. And that's my dogs are barking as I was making a point about the economy. But I think, it is important to acknowledge that. I think like that I feel a lot of restaurant groups, and I mean, in the sense, obviously you supply like the food for like a lot of this and the people into like different companies. I mean, I couldn't even figure out, I mean, what even restaurants or brands you guys work with, but I imagine with 300,000 people, you're in so many like cafeterias, and I mean, I could imagine it's kind of anywhere you kind of would buy a food service. Like,
and you wouldn't recognize us by the name Compass because we have the 28 different brands. And again, we're in, the healthcare sector, we're in hospitals, we're in, senior living centers, and you're not going to see Compass at the cafeteria when you enter the hospital, right? But we are running that whole operation. Same thing at lots of different universities, even schools K through 12. You're not going to see, Compass as you walk onto campus or in your kid's school. But those contracts, we run that whole kitchen, and we do the supply chain for that whole kitchen. And then in the B&I business and industry sectors, we're in lots of different convention centers and law firms and big tech companies. I mean, we're in, if you go to work and you get food at work, probably there.
Well, it's funny because I really wanted to contextualize an example, but I honestly couldn't find like any. I was like, in my head, I was like, I guess it's like workplaces and school cafeterias and hospitals, but I don't know. I don't want to say it on the podcast. So here we are.
Yeah.
I've now said it on the podcast. So now everybody, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, and if you go to our website, which we've tried to really, I think our team has done a really good job of streamlining too, because it is such a complex area. You want people to be able to go to your website and understand like, okay, where are you? What do you guys do? All of the brands are listed there. And so what you'll see there is how they're divided up between B&I healthcare and education. And then you'll see some of the specific brands that you would recognize when you go into any of those places. So, you might see Flick, you would see Bon Appetit, you would see Restaurant Associates, Wolfgang Puck, you would see Morrison Living, you would see Crothall, you would see Chartwells. So those brands are much more recognized brands if you're in the industry, and so those are all under the Compass umbrella.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, well, I know that we're way over time, and I feel like I'm really.
It's been good.
Okay. I'm very happy with that. Very, very happy with that. The last question I ask everybody is a very, very vague question on purpose, because I like just throwing people off kilter a bit at the very end, because I'm a nice guy, which is, given the audience for this podcast is your peers, talent leaders, HR leaders, operations leaders, CEOs, founders. Like, what advice would you give them?
Advice. Bless.
Pertaining to your own experience, I guess, you know what I mean? Like in the hospitality industry. I'll narrow it down slightly.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is gonna, at the risk of sounding a little bit cliche, but there are always things to learn. There are always new ways to do things, and you've got to be looking for them. You've got to be open to that. And you've got to really be willing to get out of your own way and really think about things differently to solve problems in a new way. So that would be one. And then I think the other one is, you didn't ask me this, but I'll frame it this way. If I could have one superpower in my role, it would be giving and receiving feedback. And so there's a tie there, because I want to be in a place where I'm always ready and willing to receive feedback. And I always want to take advantage of an opportunity to give good feedback so that someone can learn in the moment and be able to grow in their career as well.
That's awesome feedback. And I honestly, even from my own personal perspective of hearing that, I'm like, I need to be so much better about that. I'm like the most defensive person. It's like, what do you mean I'm not amazing? But no.
You are amazing. You're the exception. You are amazing.
My mother will be so happy. Thanks so much for coming on. This has been awesome. And like, honestly, we kind of covered a lot of ground in this time. And I feel like it's going to be super, super helpful for people to listen to it. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. I appreciate the time.